Welcome to Warfighter Sanctuary. Here we talk with local veteran business owners, their military journey, civilian life, their business, and the services they offer.
I am the soldier's lost voice. Come on!
Lock it in and listen up. Here's your host, Andre Rivera.
Is this what they want?
Welcome to the Warfighter Sanctuary podcast. I'm your host, Andre Rivera. Our podcast is sponsored by the 501c3 nonprofit organization, the Veterans Resource Network, dedicated to veteran businesses and veteran networking here in South Florida. Many veterans have a challenge when leaving the military and integrating back into the civilian sector. Folks were building their social networks, their business networks, their connections, and the familiarity with their area. Veterans were out there serving their country, and we missed out on that. And it's almost like we were at a disadvantage trying to start over. So they can find mentors and guides in this path, folks that have already been through it already, and that can give them a helping hand and say, hey, do it this way. This is what worked for me. So with that said, let's jump right into it. Today's guest is Evan GRAVER. He is a Navy veteran. Evan, welcome to the show. Welcome to Warfighter Sanctuary. Please tell us a little bit about your story. Tell us about what services you provide these days.
I am a Navy veteran. I served from 97 to 2000. I have my own self-publishing company. I am a self-published author. I have 18 books out right now and writing more every day. And I started my own publishing company because I wanted to get a business going that would help me in the publishing industry to handle the finances, the write-offs, and all the advertising and all the fun stuff that goes into the business. That's not just writing the books. It's all the different hats that an author, a self-published author, has to wear that a traditional author might not have to deal with. I was just going to say I got started in writing in 2000. Well, I guess I could say I started writing when I was a kid, and I've always had a passion for it and kept a notebook at my side pretty much my whole life, and started putting together some short stories to make a book. And most of the books I write have some sort of former military people in it. I am a disabled veteran. I'm a T10 paraplegic. And so my books have paraplegics. They have amputees. I wanted to serve a class of people that I feel is underserved in books and writing. And
how many books have you published to date?
I have published 18 to date. I'm looking to roll out 2 more this year. It's all just in the writing schedule. And like you, I wear a lot of different hats trying to get everything done. And writing sometimes takes a backseat to that. But 18 books right now and always trying to get more out.
It's good that you bring that up because I was just telling you about my challenges, with the nonprofit. I have forms I had to fill out. We had the taxes this year, our annual reports, all of that. And a lot of folks don't see that or consider that, which is exactly why it's important to have this network so we can pass that information down. Because I wish I would have had someone to speak to before doing all this, because I'm learning as the fines come in and I'm getting letters from the state and you got to do this and you got to do that. I'm like, wow, I didn't know about all this stuff. What is the ideal software to use for what I'm trying to accomplish? What's the best way? What's the best medium for podcast? Even what we're doing right now, usually we do it in person. So all of these are curveballs that we learn as we're going. And like you're saying, you want to just write, but you have to learn how to do marketing. You have to learn how to do accounting. You have to learn how to do, everything that comes along with having an actual business. And those are challenges, a lot of challenges. Again, if you don't know the problem, how can you solve it in advance? If you're just, it's almost, you have to be reactive to some extent, which is why the whole purpose, which I was fumbling in the beginning, but I was trying to express, that's really the purpose, the essence of having a veteranette, a network of veterans, because how cool would it be if we had a meeting where we can get together and a lot of these questions could have been answered for you when you first started. A lot of these questions could have been answered to me when we first started. But how many other hats are you wearing? So you mentioned marketing, like how do you market and how do you talk a little bit about the business? Because I know there's a lot more to the writing aspect, which is probably the most challenging part, but still there's so much more to it, I'm sure.
Well, actually, for me, the writing is the easiest part of it all. And
Oh, it is it.
yeah,
All right.
so, but, when I I first published a book back in 20, I kind of followed the
Hmm.
route of what most self-publishing new authors do. And I went straight to Amazon Kindle and went into Kindle Unlimited, which is a tremendous service for self-published authors. And it just, when Bezos launched that service, it brought a lot of new people into writing and eliminated some of the gatekeepers, the agents, and that kind of stuff that prevented people from getting published. And then Kindle requires you to be committed to them, especially in the Kindle Unlimited. So you can't sell your books anywhere else. You can sell paperbacks everywhere, but you can't sell ebooks anywhere outside of Kindle Unlimited if you're in their program. I know guys who are making $1 million doing that program, and it's phenomenal for them, but it wasn't the right step for me. And I wanted to go wide and serve a greater audience, getting into Kobo and Barnes and Noble and Apple, iTunes, that kind of stuff. And so I've had to learn the ins and outs of managing those platforms. You're converting your books from a Word document into EPUBs or PDFs so you can upload those. And then you're, figuring out the ins and outs of the platforms. And then you got your website on the backside where you're telling people where to go to buy your book. So I've learned web design, just a large stuff that I never thought I was going to learn or wanted to learn. And then on top of that, Facebook has just exploded our world in terms of social media, and it's also the number one advertising platform. And don't get me wrong, I can despise Facebook as much as everybody else, but when it comes to spending your advertising dollars, it's the place to go. And people don't want to be interrupted by ads, but I love it when they click and buy.
But they get me all the time. They get
exactly. So, and like I said, writing takes a backseat sometimes to this stuff because my new focus is selling direct to the consumer. So I'm not only do I have a website, but I set up a Shopify page so that I'm selling directly to the book reader instead of using the other services, which to get in a little technical stuff, it's, they kind of they hold sway on your intellectual property, and then they'll hold your earnings for up to 3 months. So with going to direct, I can, get my money in the bank straight away and within a day's time. And I like to eat. I don't always like when people hold my money. What are they doing with my money? It's like the IRS. Are they making interest on my money? And there's a lot of those are some of the different hats that, you're the advertiser. So you're learning ad platforms, Amazon ads, Facebook ads, Instagram ads, and there's a lot of other book only ad services, and it's a lot. And, you're always doing social media, or, people are always encouraging me, oh, you should be on YouTube. So I'm trying to delve into that. So your day is carved up into different niches, and you have to find the time to do all of this stuff and be with your family and find the balance that you need in life. As I say, especially for, veterans coming out of service and trying to find that balance of, when we leave the service, that's our dedication. That's our bread and butter. When we step out of that and we take the uniform off, we have to find a new balance. We have to find a new perspective on life and new goals, because the military is, is very goal oriented. We have a, plan of the day. And once you walk out of there, you have to figure out your own plan of the day. And you have to figure out those long range goals. And sometimes that's just not easy.
And it's also complicated because when we were in, we always had that gunnery sergeant or that leader that you can go to ask for guidance. And now you're pretty much on your own, and you're your own motivation. You're your own plan of the day. You got to come up with it all. And that's where a lot of us run into that challenge, which is, again, back to why I think it's important to have some guides and mentors, especially with everything that you're mentioning. You're mentioning Facebook ads. Like when I got into this, I never thought of Facebook ads. It was not on my radar at all. When we talk about the computer software, my computer's sitting there right now. I spent all this money on a computer and then I get the blue screen of death, and now I got to deal with that. Now podcast editing is delayed. Like all of these are things that I was like, wait a minute. I wanted to help veterans with a network. What the hell does this have to do with anything that I'm focused on? But now it's like the most important, it's the linchpin to everything is editing in the computer. But wait a minute, I didn't want to be an editor. That's not why I got into this. I wanted to help veterans. So now I got to be the editor guy, you know? Social media, like you mentioned social media, they said that you got to be more on YouTube. It's like, I don't want to be more on YouTube. Last year I had a coach and, you know, it was like 5 times a day. Here's a schedule, you know, post this, post that, post what you're eating, post your macros, post your workout of the day. And I felt like a fraud. Like it's really me. It's what I do. But like, who cares what I eat? Who cares that I'm working out? You know, I don't understand, you know, but there's all these different things that you got to consider. And then again, and the point of that is I believe I was getting bad advice, you know, because my audience, who cares what I'm working out or eating? You know, I'm more concerned about business networks and that's what I should be focused on. And that's it. But anyway, you just get bombarded with so much information. How do you narrow it down to what's essential to meeting your, you know, personal goals?
I think number one, it does help to have some sort of mentor and go out and build the network for whatever business you're going to be in, be it social media or scuba diving or fishing or writing books, whatever. You got to have somebody to help show you the ropes, because if not, you're just going to flounder around and make the same mistakes. When I started writing, I went to, you know, I had favorite authors I like to read on Kindle Unlimited. And so I went to some of them and they were very helpful. They kind of showed me the ropes and I took their advice, and you always have to mold it into whatever path that you're on and work through that advice and come up with your own plan from there. And then you always have to develop more people, because sometimes the best meaning people give you the worst advice. And they don't always know they're giving you bad advice, but it may have worked for them, but it's just not working for you. So it's that constant networking, constant figuring out what works for you and figuring out, because, you know, what worked for me with Facebook ads may not work for you and your business with Facebook ads. Our audiences might be completely different, or it might be one segment of the audience is pertinent, like veterans, or, you know, veterans who like to read books, or veterans who like to read books and like nonprofits. So it's always finding that balance and then I read a lot of books, either self-help books or how to do stuff books, or, you know, if I can't figure it out, I'll fall back is to go to Google and just type the question in and see what comes up. So, and that's a kind of how I muddled through my career and got to where I'm at. So fortunately, I found some good mentors, especially with the direct sales stuff. So I'm really looking forward to digging in. And that again is learning all new stuff and learning, you know, how to build landing pages and learning, you know, new software to track people and just, it's
funnels. I'm sure you do funnels.
Oh yeah. Funnels to get your consumer from Facebook to buying that book on whatever platform you're selling it on. It's always tweaking and figuring it out. And that's never the hat I ever plan to wear. And I can tell you that looking at numbers just gives me a headache. I can write through a book any day of the week. Sitting down and work on a spreadsheet gives me the hives.
I know. Yeah, me too. This tax season came and I was like, oh, and it's one of those things you keep pushing to the side, but you got to face it. And I think that's the biggest challenge is, you know, trying to, like we've said it several times, like trying to get good at things that, you know, that's not what drove you. That's not what drives your passion. It's not what you're excited about, but you got to do it to get to where you need to go. That can be challenging. So let's talk about a little bit about your creative process. Cause you said the easiest part for you is actually writing. And what inspires you to come up with your stories? And, you know, what's your creative process?
I can write pretty much any, you know, some people have a certain set hours or whatever. I can write any time of day. I can, you know, in the morning or at night right before I go to bed. And my mind's always churning and thinking about it. And I have to take notes so I remember everything I'm thinking about so I can get it down on paper. But I'm what people call a pantser. So there's two types of writers. There's a guy that plots everything out, and Jeffrey Deaver, and if you're familiar with his work, he's the kind of guy that has a giant bulletin board and he'll start with index cards, and he'll have everything plotted out from the beginning to end and what's going to happen in every chapter. And when I sit down to write a book, I may have a basic idea for the book, but I don't know what's going to happen or how it's going to end. And every day it's a learning process of what's going to happen. And I'm just writing by the seat of my pants is what they call it. So my pants are, and most of my ideas come from the news. So my main series, the Ryan Weller thriller series, you can see the book Dark Water. That's the first book in the series. That book came out of some short stories I had written over the years. And then just looking at current events in the world and game playing where those might go and then applying it to the book. And I can sit down, usually if I come up with that kernel for a book, I can sit down and knock out the first 30,000 words in a couple of days. And then I'll get to the middle of it and go, all right, now how I'm going to end this thing. And then I have to step back and say, look at what I've already written, come up with some new ideas, figure out what the middle is going to be, and then figure out the ending. Because once I have the ending, the rest just kind of falls into place. And the characters will tell me what to do. It's like having multiple personalities in your head. The characters will I can hear them talk. I hear their tone of voice. I can see their action. And my wife thinks I'm absolutely crazy. I can do it all. It's like having multiple personalities. And they just come out on the page. I kept trying to get my character, Ryan Weller, to move into Fort Lauderdale, because his story is that he's a former Navy EOD and he gets into commercial diving with his buddy. And all the commercial diving happens in Texas. So their main headquarters is in Texas. And so Ryan decides he doesn't want to be a commercial diver. He wants to be more of a troubleshooter and help people in need. And so he lives on a sailboat. He travels around. I kept trying to bring him to Fort Lauderdale, and he kept saying, I don't think so. I don't like it there. I'm going to stay in the Caribbean, and that's where most of the action takes place. And then just about everywhere from Venezuela to the Bahamas. So, and every book's different. It's a standalone, but it's all a series. So it's just about seeing what's going to happen in the world and kind of theorizing what's going to happen next. There's an interesting story about. So last year I started a book series and with the guy who's a CIA agent, and the plot basically revolved around Venezuela and Guyana. And Venezuela has been trying to take the scuba region from Guyana since and last year they had a referendum in Venezuela that basically Maduro said, we're going to take back this region. And I thought, oh great, I got to throw away 2 whole books because I hadn't published them yet. And
yeah. Oh no.
So I was like, crap, if they go to war, I mean, that was the whole part of the book is these countries go to war. So I thought, well, great. If these countries actually do, I got to throw away 2 whole books and start over again. So, but that's what comes from everyday, what you see every day on the news. And I think Brad Thor once said that a good fiction writer is like a fortune teller.
Wow, that's fascinating. So it's almost, you're right. You're going real time. You're checking out the world and then writing your stories based on what's going on.
It is. Some of it's real time. And so I've gone back and to look at some of the books to make sure I have some of the stuff, the details accurate when I write a newer book. And I think, well, that happened during Hurricane Irma, and most people are going to look at that and go, man, that was almost 10 years ago now. So it's kind of crazy.
It's crazy. I mean, it is crazy because then there's stories where, like, I look at, like, for the current administration, not to get political at all, but like, a president that can barely walk up. And if I saw that in a Tom Clancy book, I would be like, oh, Tom Clancy's losing it. He's writing these ridiculous stories now. And no, this is the world we live in, or just what's going on with just everything in the world. Like, with just let's just say everything, because then it's going to sound like I'm trying to be political, but I'm not. But you just look at the world like, wow, that's insane. Like, who would have thought of that? So, as a writer, there's endless possibilities.
Absolutely. So it begs the question: was the Manchurian Candidate actually a documentary?
Yeah,
and not a.
Yeah, I know. Well, there's another movie. Have you seen Idiocracy?
Oh yeah, it feels like
I say that too. I go, it was a comedy. Now it's a documentary on what's going to happen to America.
The first book I wrote back in 2016, I kind of shelved it for a few years until I recently released it. It's called Liberty Brigade. And I wrote it at the height of the presidential debates and between Obama and Trump. And I just hated where Obama was taking us. I didn't want to see Clinton become president. And so I wrote a book, basically it's about militias and conspiracy theories and, the
Nick
militias get fed
McCain?
up.
McCain?
No, Obama in 2016 when Trump first got elected, right? So
Yeah, 2016.
yeah, yeah,
Against Hillary.
So I really didn't want to see her get in office, but so I wrote a book that basically it was about militias taking over the government.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's interesting though, because right, if you would have gotten to my house, you would have seen I have two copies of the Declaration of Independence, framed. Right by my bedside, I have the Declaration of Independence in a book format. I have the Constitution broken down clause by clause. I have several, but because it fascinates me, because I feel like the waters get muddied with laws and this and case law and all. I go, why don't we just go to the foundation? What was the essence of America and how far have we deviated from that? And I feel like it was far from perfect because it took us over 100 years to actually believe that all men are equal. We say all men are equal, July 4th, but then it takes us over 100 years to like abolish slavery. So I get it, but the intention was still pure. The fact that all these men came together and said, hey, we're tired of kings. We're tired of emperors and men born into wealth, or born into power, I should say, telling us what we need to do. We truly believe that all men are just being born. You have the right to live. And that you can give governments the right to manage things so everyone can live in harmony, but not to step those bounds. So when you say that, yes, I'm always thinking about that. Like, especially now, like we've deviated so far. It says it right there in the first page of the Declaration of Independence. Well, it's one page, but it's one big giant page. But it says it right there in the first paragraphs, when a government becomes too tyrannical, or falls into despotism, which is tyranny, then it's time to fight them on that. When it comes to freedom of speech, when it comes to the Second Amendment, so I can see a great book. Let me stay on books. All right. Let me stay focused on books. But yes,
that's exactly where that book was born out of. Because all the things you talked about, being ruled by the power elite, the deep state, whatever you want to call it. That's happening here right now. You don't want to get into politics and conspiracy theories. We'll roll out of that.
We can talk about anything. No, we can talk about anything. I just don't want to feel like it's forced, because right away folks hear veteran and they think that it's always going to be one way, but it's not. I'm an American first. I don't follow blindly into certain parties where I just vote a certain way. I try to see what they talk about first. And I feel like they should be more transparent. With today's technology, you should be able to go to a website and click any candidate, and it should tell you like a whole list, almost like a baseball card on where he stands on abortion, where he stands on First Amendment, Second Amendment. We're like definitively, not a speech that's kind of ambiguous, not where things are useful for votes right now, but like, where do you stand? Like, why can't you just tell me where you stand on abortion? Why are you going to wait to see where the winds are blowing at that moment? So I feel like, they should have complete transparency. And, I don't think we do, but yeah, that's fascinating,
Yeah. I have a friend of mine who says that all the time that every bill should be one page. It should be posted on the internet, and then we should all be able to vote for it. And then our representatives should vote the way that we voted for it. And if they don't, then we can see
exactly
where they stand.
Clearly.
So,
yes, clearly black, like there, it's clear, but they don't do it that way. And they don't do it that way on purpose. So that's why I say I like to keep the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution close to me, because if you read it, it makes it clear. Like everything we're just talking about that's the way it should be. If our founding father, like, the what would Jesus do bracelet, like what would the founding fathers do? Think about that. What you just said, like it should be transparent. The bill should be one page, because again, it goes back to what was the intention? The intention is that everybody has a say. So if we have the technology and we have the capability, then if we're not doing it, then they're intentionally being manipulative. You can only come to certain conclusions like, well, they're intentionally making it vague, and those 30,000 page bills that come through with like the one that just came for the, sending money overseas, and then it has all these other hidden agendas within the pages. There's hidden things there. It's like, that goes so against what the founding fathers envisioned. They wanted complete transparency and very, very simple to make those decisions and see, hey, is the guy that we voted in representing our visions or no? Or is he just representing his own vision of what he wants to do for whatever reason? So yeah, there we go. That's the next book.
Obama said, never let a good crisis go to waste. And I think what he meant by that is always consolidate the government's power. I mean, if the people see a crisis, then they're going to look to the government to fix it. And then the government's going to write a new law that gives them more power and takes more stuff away from the people. So if we're in a constant
and it's so
crisis,
confusing,
we're just keep giving away our power.
Yeah.
So.
And they make it very confusing, especially with.
Wrong, so.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But it's and then we talk about like I have a friend of mine, Boone Cutler. He's also an author. He's a veteran, but right now they're writing a book for fifth generation warfare. It talks about a lot of that, that how we're being manipulated by the media and the powers that be, etc. Like I can go on Instagram, and if I call a certain candidate an idiot, it'll flag me and say, hey, are you sure? It's crazy. It's so Orwellian, because it's like, do you really want to say that? It's like, you got a chance. And then there's like a little timer going across the screen. It's like it's thinking. It's like it's giving me a ultimatum. It says, undo your comment. I start looking at that and go, are we seeing how crazy the world is? It's saying, and the time is hacking. It's like, and then I'm getting nervous and I'm going, no. And then I go, no, my conviction is, go ahead and put that. Let's see if I get banned now for making my comment. And then I look at my comment. I'm like, this is America. I have the right to call anybody an idiot. That's not hate speech. I'm not saying it because of their race. I'm not saying it because of their religion. I'm saying it because the guy can't finish speeches and he reads the teleprompter like Will Ferrell in Anchorman. That's why I called him an idiot, So, you know what I mean? And it's like, you can't even say that anymore. That's fifth generation warfare. That is, the powers that be kind of sifting people a certain way. And when you go, well, Andre, that was just you. You're being dramatic. That's just you. I go, no, because there's millions of people. There's 22 million people right here in Florida alone. How many? And there's over 300 million in America. So you do that enough times. Well, you're manipulating the masses. You are manipulating the masses, because now people will second guess. Well, let me not call this guy an idiot.
You can fall back to two things. I say you can fall back to two things to make your point. Operation Mockingbird by the CIA, which was to manipulate the media, and Chinese social credit scores. We're adopting that right here in the country. That's exactly what
I didn't know about it. Please talk about that. I didn't know about that.
So Operation Mockingbird was, if I get the name wrong, just don't shoot me. So the CIA, back in the 60s or 70s, the CIA basically came out and said, we're going to run this operation on the media, and we're going to feed disinformation in and control what is being said. And so they're not supposed to operate against American people, but that's exactly what they were doing. And so you can see that playing out right now. If every news network is showing you the same headline, that's what the outcome of Operation Mockingbird is supposed to be. It's to control the thoughts and processes of people. So it's all the CIA. It boils down to the CIA.
Exactly. Which contradicts, again, back to the Declaration and the Constitution. It contradicts everything that's there. To me, when you see, that's why I like keeping that close, because when you read it, it makes it so clear. It makes the lines clear. When you read all the laws today and case law, it muddies the water. Well, back in 1970, who cares about 1970? Let's go to, what was the intention? And if you don't like what's written there, then this is not the country for you. That's the way I look at it. If you don't believe in those values, then this is just not the place for you. Which is crazy, because right now you have like in Berkeley and what other universities? You have these kids
Penn State,
protesting Hamas. They're protesting for terrorists on American campuses and then blocking Jews. And I go, this is incredible. I mean, everyone says never forget. They already forgot 9/11, but did they also forget the Holocaust? Did they also forget, putting Jews in concentration camps and putting them in ovens and all the horrors that happened? It's like, it's immediately forgotten when people can block kids of a certain religion or belief system from going to their classes on campus in an American soil. That to me is worth dying and fighting for. And I can't believe that we see that every day. And you talk about, manipulating and the media manipulating. Like, I just don't get that. That's.
I don't know if you've seen this. I think the president of Iran started a few years ago where he kept coming out and saying that the Holocaust wasn't real and that it was all made up. And I have a grandfather who was a photographer during World War II, and he went in and photographed a lot of those prison camps. And
wow.
I've never seen the photographs he took, but I've seen souvenirs he brought back, stuff that they made that Jewish prison labor people make. They used all those guys as slave labor, and they made just intricate pottery and just guns and everything else. So it's all true. It's we have people that have been there and saw it. They're not alive today. So I guess we could decide whatever history is because there's nobody alive to tell us it actually happened. So,
but that's why it's important to document everything.
Exactly. And I think that's what people, they try and change our society by taking down the statues, by telling us things didn't really happen and demeaning the history of our country and taking it out, the good and the bad. You have to tell the whole story.
We need them both.
Yeah. You can't,
tell the real story. Tell the real story.
Yep. So, and I when I joined the Navy, it wasn't out of patriotism or anything like that. I just wanted a different job. I felt like I was on a dead-end job, so the Navy was a great escape route. And it wasn't until I was, signing all the paperwork that my grandfather, who was served on destroyers in World War II, started telling stories my mother had never. And he told me more stories about being in the Navy than he had told anybody. And so military service was, I'm like third generation in the Navy. So I hadn't really ever, I always thought it'd be cool, but then when it got down to it, I was like, yeah, I'm going to go in because there were some things that happened in my life. And I said, well, I'm going to go in. But once you're standing there facing the flag and they tell you to raise your hand and you swear allegiance to, you repeat the oath and it starts to come home and you realize what exactly you're going in for. And then you get to boot camp and you're like, why did I do this? But I don't know. I've always heard that
exactly.
It was pretty easy. So that's what everybody tells me. But my experience was different. And then, I had
it's all relative. It's all relative to what you know.
Yeah. I had guys graduate. So my RDC he smoked us every chance we got. And the guy in my graduating classes and the different division, they never PT. So it was all, their chief was on going out in retirement, and our chief was like, we want to be a CNO division, and so it was all relative to the experience.
The pledge, that's what I want to touch on. So you were saying, you weren't, you weren't necessarily patriotic, you weren't joining for all of that, but once you found it, so I feel like it's just ignorance, not like in an insulting way, but just not knowing, the sacrifices that your predecessors, that veterans did before you. And when you start understanding that, when you're understanding like all the sacrifices just to have a country where like, we don't want the King of England. We don't want the King of Spain. We don't want kings telling us what to do. We want us to manage ourselves, to the point where, hey, you're going to give us taxes, too many taxes now. Well, guess what? Now it's worth fighting for, and you're going to tell us what we got to do. Well, it's worth killing and dying for. And then, and all these wars. And when you put them all together, you go, wow, this is what they did that for. And now I'm honored to be a part of this and to uphold, freedom for everybody. Like it's a real thing. It's not just like something corny you hear in a movie. It's like a real thing. And then when it hits you, you're like, wow, then you get this incredible patriotism that you carry forever. That's why I feel like everybody should join, not necessarily the military as far as, combat arms, but I feel like every kid, like in other countries, should do 2 years at least. Well, it could be local. It could be a local government. It could be, Coast Guard stuff. But I feel like every American should do something. And because they will gain a new appreciation for being American and understanding the history. Because I don't think they teach us enough in high school. I think they kind of gloss over, the Declaration of Independence. They just make it's like stories. Oh, George Washington, he fought this war and then he did. No. What is the essence of it all? Like they don't really get into that. And I almost feel like, the conspiracy is they don't want us to know so much about that, because then they'll be talking like I'm talking, like we're talking right now. And they don't want us doing that. They just want us to think of like history. Oh, July 5th, it was signed. Yeah, but it took 100-something years for us to really start trying to live that way. And even now, now we're the closest we've ever been to truly living that way. But yeah, it's fascinating. But we have so many book ideas with the last 40 minutes of us talking. How about like that new movie? Yeah, like Civil War. There's a movie called Civil War. And I don't want to talk about the movie specifically because I haven't seen it, but just like that concept that we're talking about, like that could be a great story. And I know right now people are really fascinated with that. And that's that could potentially happen. I'm hoping that it doesn't. We never want a civil war, but it can absolutely happen, especially when they're over, stepping their bounds. I mean, every tax season, every April, I think of it. I'm like, man, we went to tax. We fought for little taxes. Now they take everything and they multiple tax us. I mean, I can get a paycheck, and then when I go buy some coffee, I get taxed on the coffee. And the guy that owns the coffee shop, he also got taxed. So I'm like, wait a minute, we're getting taxed like in 6 different directions for the same dollar. It's insane. By the time that dollar gets to me, it's 15 cents because it's been whittled by taxes from the same entity. They're just taxing everybody differently. So it's insane how they do that.
Oh, we got to feed the local, the state, and the federal. You got to feed every government. So, and I don't have a way around that, but I always think a flat tax or, a percentage would be a better way to go. Smarter people than me would have to figure that out. So I know that our founding fathers fought over, they dumped tea in a harbor for 3% tax. And we're paying 6% sales tax over there. So, and what do we pay? We work, what did they say? They work 4 months out of the year just to pay the taxes? When do we start revolting? I wanted to roll back into the military aspect of it. I wasn't especially for so much. The characters in my book are EOD or John Phoenix was in the Green Berets. And I want to tell everybody I was not that. I had no desire to be that. I didn't want to PT that much. I hated running. I barely passed the PRT half the time I took it. But I love being in the military. I went in 97 and I went to boot camp in December. So I went to Great Mistakes in Chicago in December in the freezing cold. And in February when I left, I was there over Christmas and New Year's. And in February when I left, they had a massive snowstorm. The same day I landed in Pensacola, and it was like 70 degrees out. So it was phenomenal. I went to aviation electronics tech school down there in Pensacola for 6 months, and then went to Norfolk as an AT, working on MH-10, HM-14, which has been a decommissioned squadron last year. But we did mine countermeasures. We hunted for underwater mines. We used all kinds of different methods to find them, and then we would cut them and destroy them and clear the sea lanes and keep shipping and sea lanes open for our military. So that was our mission. And we also did vertical onboard delivery, carrying mail and supplies and that kind of stuff out to the ship. We had a det in Bahrain that I went to for 6 months, and that was an eye-opening experience. I really thought that we were going to be Indiana Jones landing in the desert, and everybody was living in tents. Yeah. And we get there and it's freaking high rises and billboards, and it's, Times Square everywhere. But it was fascinating. We spent 6 months in Bahrain, and it was phenomenal. We had a great time. There's so many stories that me and my buddies have. They start with this one time in Bahrain, kind of like the one time in band camp stories. But my wife gets tired of hearing them when my buddies and I get together. But so we did, when we were in Bahrain, we did vertical onboard delivery. We did underwater mapping, and we did a little bit of mine.
So what does that entail? Could you kind of break that down? That down a little bit? Like when you say that, what do you mean? What does that entail?
So with the 53, we towed side scan sonar through the water. So the 53 had a giant spool in it, and we ran a cable down to this, what we call a fish. And it was about an 8-foot long torpedo looking thing with wings on it. You can control, make it dive up and down. And the fish had side scan sonar on it, so it would scan the bottom, and we could pinpoint different things. Underwater mines were the main thing we were looking for, but with the mapping, you were looking for seabed contours and sunken wrecks and whatever else is down there. I mean, you could look at a you could spot a Coke can and then run the laser over it and read the can. So, if they spotted something interesting, the fish had a laser on the back that they could shoot down and read whatever was there in the water. And that was what they did. I wasn't too much involved in that. I just worked on the equipment. I'd take it apart, make sure all electronics worked on it, make sure everything was clean, ready to go for the next flight. When I got back, in the States, we did a lot of stuff bouncing around in the San Diego. We had a sister squadron in Corpus Christi at the time, which is now in Norfolk. So, we're always time doing missions out of those areas, and they always like to do it on the coldest day of the year in the rain. So we're all standing outside just miserable. Why, I don't know, but that seems to be the Navy way.
So you were saying, Evan, you were saying that your characters, you took like EOD guys, special forces guys. So when you use those characters, I'm sure you do research, but do you talk to like folks that actually did it? Do you know, ODA guys or EOD guys that you get to talk to, or just do research?
Yeah,
what's your process?
Yep, absolutely. So I work at a dive shop here in town called Aquatic Ventures with the owner is Kerry McNeil. He also runs a nonprofit called Dive for Vets. Shout out to Kerry. And
he's supposed to be here next.
Hey, great. Get him on. He's a great guy.
He is.
But we have a lot of guys come through the shop that are prior military, have that kind of experience, and work locally in those areas. So it's always a great resource. I get to pick their brains. I get to say, hey, is this the way you would do, build a bomb, or is this how you would do it? Is this what you saw over there? I have to ask. A lot of times I have to ask very specific questions in a non-specific way, if you know what I mean, because they don't always want to talk about what they saw, or they don't want to talk about top secret stuff, or I can have a bomb building Bible on my computer, and the FBI and the CIA are going to come in and go, "Hey, what you doing?" So every once in a while, when I'm doing research on the computer, I'll type in, "Hey CIA, I'm just trying to research for a book." So I know I'm hitting some trigger words there for people to look at. So it is what it is. If they want to come in and go, "Hey, buy a book, you read it, see what I'm doing." So, but it's great to have those guys to talk to. I read a lot of different stories, a lot of different books. Talking to people actually is the most interesting thing. Just like you and I are doing here, is sitting down with those people and picking their brains. And a lot of them don't want to tell their story, or they don't want to talk about it, or like you said, some of the stuff is classified, or they talk circles around what they did. So, but it really helps build the character, give the character some authenticity, and to pinpoint a CIA agent, get them to talk about what they're doing is kind of tough. So I got to rely on a lot of online research, and I've read a lot of books about CIA and what CIA people are doing. And so, it's fiction. So if I get something wrong, there's a disclaimer right there in the front of the book. Don't hold me
Exactly.
So I try to make it as authentic as possible. I try to get all the details right, because to me, that's important. I hate reading a book and being like, "Oh, he slapped a magazine into this gun, and then he flipped the safety off," and you're like, "Well, wait a minute, a Glock doesn't have a safety," So,
Yeah.
or
Yeah. That happens a lot.
Like that. Oh yeah. So it's like, get it right. If you're writing in this genre and you want to be a master of the genre, get it right. That's my main. That's what I tell people. If you're gonna write, get it right. Yep. If I'm gonna write dystopian fiction and make up a world, then yeah, I can write whatever I want. But if I'm talking about a handgun that everybody can go to the range and pick up and shoot, then you got to get it right.
Exactly. So what you said, you have 2 books that you're coming up with this year. Could you talk a little bit about them without giving away too much?
So those books are in the John Phoenix series, and like I said earlier, that series was born out of looking at what Venezuela and Guyana were doing. And the first 2 books, Rising Phoenix and Target Phoenix, deal with the main character, John Phoenix. The first book is he's basically in and out of Venezuela. The second book is they're trying to turn the vice president of Venezuela into a CIA asset. And at the end of the book, Maduro, I changed Maduro's name to a different last name, but basically everything the character does is straight out of Maduro. Everything Maduro has done.
Playbook.
So at the end of the book, Maduro is taken off in a plane and he gets shot down by a surface-to-air missile. And John Phoenix happens to be standing on the tarmac, so the CIA and Venezuela pinned it on him. Everybody knows he didn't do it, but so he gets pinned on him, so he gets burned and he gets kicked out of the agency. So the third book is called Wanted Phoenix, and it deals with the fallout from him being hunted by basically the Sabine, which is the Venezuela intelligence service. And it's an acronym, SEBIN. It's an acronym for however they say it in Spanish. I'll brutally mispronunciate it. So I can barely speak English at times. But the fourth book, I have no plot yet for. I'm just still trying to work on one of Phoenix. It's kind of in the middle of it. It's like pulling teeth. I tell you that the writing part is the easiest part. But there's some days where it's like pulling teeth. My goal every day is to write down 2,000 words. And I think for the last month, I've written maybe 500 words a day. And half of those I've gone back and erased and rewritten. So it's,
well, that's the hard part.
Yeah. It's
I try to write.
Yeah. So,
and then you go back and fix it and go back and fix it. And then you just throw it away. I mean, that's my process. Like I write it and I don't like it. And then at the end I throw it away and I just don't even do it. And there I am.
Yeah. And that's it. Yeah, I see. So I was involved for years. I was involved with the writers group here in Fort Lauderdale, and most of the people that came in were never going to publish a book. It was like a social hobby for them, or they were like me. They were pantsers, so they would come up with a great story idea, and you get through that first quarter of the story, and then if you don't have the discipline to sit down and keep writing and to figure out what the story is, you just end up putting it on a shelf and then writing something else, because if you can't come up with the idea and how to finish the story, you'll invariably come up with a better idea and you'll go over and start writing that. And then you got how many unfinished books sitting on your shelf. So that was my decision when I first started writing, was that it's like, if this is going to be my passion, I need to do, I need to make it a full-time job. And I was reading an autobiography about John D. McDonald, and if you don't know who he is, he has a great 22-book series called about Travis McGee. He's his main character, and Travis McGee has inspired everybody from Lee Child to Dean Koontz to a lot of the top thriller writers in the genre. And John D. McDonald wrote 66 books in his lifetime, and his premise was, this is my day job. I'm going to sit down for 8 hours a day and I'm going to do nothing but write. And that's how I ended up looking at it too. And so I spend half my time writing and the other half wearing all the rest of the hats, doing the advertising, running the website and answering emails and just trying to pay the bills. And so, but anything that you're going to do like that, you gotta take it seriously. You gotta say, this is what I'm doing, and you gotta have a plan to follow through, because if you don't, you're going to be like a pantser. You're going to get halfway through and go, I don't know where I'm at. I don't know how to finish this. I'm going to go to the next cool idea. So, and having the resource like what we're doing here, and having other people to talk to and mentors and guides, and is a great way to help you push through those barriers that maybe you're stuck and you don't know where you're at or how to get through to the end of the story, because everything we do is a story. It's the hero's journey from the start, the arc up through the main action back down to the end. And that happens every day. The hero's journey happens every day. It happens over our whole lifetime. The ups and downs. We all live our own hero's journey, and it's just figuring out how to get through it, how to push through that. And you wanted to talk about getting out of the service, so I'll touch on that, because in March of 2001, I was in a motorcycle accident, and I was on active duty.
In 2001?
Yeah, 2001, March 2001. So 23 years I've been in a wheelchair. So I was in Norfolk, and I was on active duty, and they basically said, I remember laying in the bed in the hospital, and the chiefs come in from personnel, and they're like, we're putting you out. And I'm like, dude, I can do something. My upper body works. You got handicapped spaces on base. I've seen them. Let me do some yeoman work or put some papers or whatever. And they said, no, you can't deploy to a ship, so we're putting you out. You're not really of use to us. So I ended up going to Cleveland because my folks live in Ohio. So I ended up in Cleveland doing my rehab at the VA. And and at the same time, they were putting me out of the Navy. So there I was at 24 years old. I thought I finally found
Well,
the job I was going to do, or I was going to retire from, because I really love being in the Navy. I like doing it. I like my job. I like the people I was around. I like the structure of it. I like that, here's your goal. Here's the uniform you're going to wear. It made sense. To achieve rank, these are the things you need to do. So when I was at the hospital, and so I had the goal of getting out of the hospital. I mean, rehab, that consumed my just about every waking moment. And so I was having to learn all this new stuff. And at the same time, they're putting me out. And so when I finally got out of the hospital, I went home to my parents' house in July of 2000. My mom and dad lived 15 minutes from the nearest town. So we're in the middle of nowhere. And I'm by myself most of the day. And I don't have a car. I can't get out. And I'm stuck in I'm 24, man. I'm stuck in a wheelchair. I don't know how to live. I don't know how to do anything. Spent half my days crying my eyes out, another half, depressed. And, you think about suicide, or you think about how miserable your life could be. I always went back to people I saw in rehab. There were guys there who were quadriplegics and sipping puff chairs where you're blowing into a little tube to make that thing move. And so I thought, my life isn't that bad. I got my hands. As long as you got your hands. I'm at a point now where I don't fear death. I fear losing my hands and the ability to do stuff. So, so I was living in the middle of nowhere, Ohio, and basically they just were like, here's your papers. You're out. There was no, no classes saying, okay, this is what you're going to do when you get out. There was nothing. It was just, see you later. And I had a hard time working through that. I mean, between being paralyzed, losing the job I thought I was going to do for the next 20 years, and being stuck, and it was tough. There was nobody there for me to really talk to, and then I just needed somebody to come step in and say, "Hey, dude, you're still one of us." And my buddy Richie, who, God bless him, man, he's still my best friend. He called me up one day and said, "Hey, man, I'm coming to get you." And I was like, "You're doing what?" He says, "Oh, I'm driving to Norfolk, and I'm going to pick you up, and we're going to go to my mom and dad's place in West Virginia, and we're going to ride four-wheelers, and we're going to do whatever else you want, because you're still you." He's like, "I don't care that you're in a wheelchair. I don't care about any of that stuff. You're still my best friend." And I was waiting. I was like a dog waiting at the door when he showed up. I was ready to go. So we loaded up in his van, and we went down to his house in West Virginia, his parents' house in West Virginia, and we rode four-wheelers, and we did all kinds of stuff. And I just, he's the guy that stepped up and said, "You can still do this. Life is still worth living, and you need to go out, find out what it is you need to do." So, so I was still going back to Norfolk. Once I got a vehicle, I drove back to Norfolk to see him, see my other friends down there. And I still had a girlfriend down there at the time. And she couldn't handle the injury, and we ended up breaking up, but which is fine, because I met my wife, and we've been married for 19 years, so we're good to go there.
Awesome.
But I guess I just needed to get my mindset right, learning to deal with life, and but it still took me a long time.
When you talk about the transition, like you said, there was nothing there. It was just like from one day to the next, and then you're just out with no guide, no direction, no what are you going to do tomorrow. This is pre-author, pre-writing, pre-finding purpose. So with that said, your transition was more challenging than most transitions, but I think all veterans to a certain extent go through that, because I tell people it's like a bad divorce. From one day you have a complete routine, stability, you're going to get your next meal, your rank, you're not going to get kicked out or evicted, the last thing they do is going to fire you in the military. They're just going to make you work harder if you do something wrong, and then suddenly, you got to start all from scratch. We've all had it, some worse than others. Yours was extreme. You had an extreme one because then you're also paralyzed. What kept you alive? What kept you from following that tunnel vision and making, one of the biggest mistakes that we could all make, that I've been there as well. And we're talking suicide. We're talking, what kept you going at that point?
Honestly, it was a lot
What
of
helped
family, friends, as much as I did a lot of praying too. And as you can tell, I'm still in a wheelchair, so not every prayer was answered. So, but the biggest thing was we were married, my wife and I were married, I don't know, 3 or 4 years. And she came to me one day and she said, if you're going to talk about it and you know you're going to do it, just put down a sheet so I don't have to clean up after you. And I was like, oh shit, it's going to affect me. It's going to affect her. It's going to affect our son. And then I had a friend kill himself right after that. And I saw how it affected everybody around it. It affected me, and then on top of that, I had a buddy die. He drank himself to death. He had his liver failed. And so I watched two people that I was close to basically kill themselves. And in between my wife's pep talk and those two guys, it was like, maybe life is worth sticking around. It's not worth doing this to everybody else. And then on top of that, you got to go out and find something of value that makes you want to stick around. And I tried a lot of different stuff. I managed rental property and day traded, and then I got sick in 2013, and I finally convinced my wife to sell her house and move into a camper. And we traveled all over the United States for about 4 years. We lived in a camper, and then we settled in South Florida. And my son got old enough to go into high school, and so yeah, it was. And then I started writing. So I'm not going to tell you that. I still don't have dark thoughts, and I still don't think you roll out of bed every day and go, fuck, I'm still paralyzed. I'm sorry, I don't mean to.
Yeah.
But that's how it feels like. It's you got to find that thing that makes you roll on. And for me, it's writing. Writing is therapeutic, and you will see it through every book. Is that my characters suffer from PTSD, they suffer from disability, and they have to find that balance. And so writing for me is therapeutic, and researching what helps people. And I go out, I do a lot of different stuff myself. I go to acupuncture and chiropractors, even some hypnosis. So just to try the regular psychologist, and the guy was so flaming liberal, I couldn't stand it. I used to wear shirts with a gun on it just to piss him off, just to get a reaction. And after about 6 weeks, I was like, dude, I can't do this anymore with you. Because we're going to start talking about something that I really feel passionate about. And you're going to be like, well, this is a liberal mindset. I'm going to be like, I don't fucking think so. And so I was like, well, I got to find somebody else to talk to. But just having somebody to talk to is super important too. Because if you go into your mind and that's the only thing that's the only input you're getting is from yourself, it doesn't always lead to great things. You can work through a lot of issues that way, but you got to have a team. You got to have a support system, be it family or friends or whoever. And just, I would say, if you're feeling that way, pick up the phone and call somebody, because nobody wants to see you do that. Nobody wants to go through that and every day experience that loss because you make that choice.
Yeah, and it's critical. That's a running theme with the nonprofit and the podcast also, because it's something that we run into. And he said it's extreme and it's different for each person, what they're going through, and just having that support system or having someone to talk to, because at the end of it all, at that moment you feel like, you know what, man, I'm sick of this. I just want to take away the pain. And if I do this one thing, the pain disappears. The problem is, that's bullshit, because the pain doesn't disappear. Maybe it disappears for you, but the pain just goes on to everybody else. And it actually force multiplies, because before you just had that pain. Now you're sharing it with a bunch of other people. And now they're second guessed, because now the guys that you left behind, they're like, well, maybe I should also do that. Or, maybe that's a viable solution. Or, it just spreads. It's just so bad. That's why it's so important for us to have this, to have this network. And that's what I'm trying to build. And when you say like having that purpose, this is my purpose, meeting you, talking to you, finding out your story, and then being able to share your story. And hopefully, with time, this grows and we build that community where veterans can find each other, because I'm sure if a veteran sees the podcast, sees the show and says, hey, you know what? I want to write, I'm not in a wheelchair, but I just want to be a writer. Maybe I can reach out to Evan. Maybe he can give me some guidance, or at least give me, some pointers. I wonder if he'll take a 10-minute phone call from me. Of course, before I even got to ask you, of course, I know you would, just exactly. And that's my point. It's like we have such a powerful network if we can tap into it and kind of like, do it with intention. Because I know we got great guys out there, but we're all over the place. There's great nonprofits, but they're everywhere. So I'm just trying to get it so we can be like, hey, this is where you can find them. Go this way, you can find this one. Here you can find this one. You don't feel like calling him? Well, watch his podcast. He might answer a lot of your questions right there, or at least make you feel comfortable enough where, hey, maybe you can reach out to him and shoot him an email and ask him, hey, Evan, or maybe there's someone in a wheelchair that has no aspiration of doing anything business, but he heard you and he goes, you know what? I kind of relate to what Evan's talking about. The point is, if it's not out there, how is anyone ever going to know about it? Which brings, it just reminded me about something else I want to talk about that you mentioned earlier. That's why it's also important to have these podcasts, because a previous guest of mine said, how cool would it have been to talk to veterans on Guadalcanal during the day of Guadalcanal? Imagine if there was like an interview and you got to talk to those veterans right then and there and got to see video of them like we are right now. And that's the point. Our stories die with us, most stories, but now with the advent of all this technology, with the advent of podcasts and video, and now that it's more accessible to everybody. Before you had to have a studio to have this. Now the average Joe can do it. But we're still capturing our story forever. Your story today is forever. Our discussion right now is forever. So, that's the other reason why it's important to do, because we're documenting, for future generations, the trauma that we went through, the trauma of being in a wheelchair, the trauma of trying to leave the military and then trying to rediscover yourself and reinvent yourself and find purpose and find a reason to live every day. Because it's so easy to say, you know what? I was in the Navy and I was so useful to the Navy, and I was so important because we did these things that kept our country safe. Now I'm useless. It's so easy to go into that, but then you start saying, no, I can reinvent myself. I can do other things. I can put these stories together, and stories are important. I was just talking about this the other day. Stories are important. People don't think, and this is my own interpretation, but you tell me what you think. And, I think stories are important because it's what differentiates us from ants or honeybees or machines. Machines just go up, they do a job and they accomplish it. But humans, we're full of emotions. We're full of pain and anguish and sorrow or happiness. We have all those emotions. So how do you capture that? And how do you know that you're the only one that ever went through that, whether it's happiness or sadness? Well, you do stories, because stories is like advice. It's like when the mentor gives guidance to the Padawan, and he's telling him, hey, I went through that, brother. I know what you're going through. I've been through that, so how do you do that? Well, you put it in a story. Sometimes it's not so simple. Sometimes you got to read the whole story to really get it, or sometimes it's just to entertain ourselves, but either way, you're passing all these experiences. So I think stories, art, paintings, all of that, the humanities, that's what differentiates us from animals. And that's what makes us human. So I wanted to talk about that because I think storytelling is really important. I think a lot of us don't see it that way. Like right now I'm into this show about pirates, and you think, pirates, Halloween, who cares? But I see it differently. I go, no, these are veterans that they fought the system. And I go, imagine, being in the Navy, modern times it's insane. It would never happen. But imagine an aircraft carrier. And the guys go, you know what? I'm sick of that. I'm sick of the captain, man. We're taking over, and then we're going to take over other aircraft carriers. But just the idea of that. So it's such a, it's so interesting, our imaginations and the power of storytelling, how invested we can get into. Oh, but the point is, I watched this and I'm looking at every aspect of these stories, and it makes you think of other things. And I go, wow, this is what makes us different than machines or animals or ants or honeybees. We're humans, and we have these stories to pass on. It's so incredibly important, and the fact that we're document this, all of this, one day other people can look back and see the true story. And like we were saying earlier, not the watered down interpretations of it. This is what it really was, but
I'm here to answer people's questions. If they want to talk about writing, or they want to shoot me an email or whatever, I'll help. If I can't help you out, we can definitely direct you in the right way. The other thing I wanted to touch on was I also work for another nonprofit called Fishing with America's Finest. And we take veterans fishing in the Everglades for free, because our founder, Neil Stark, he founded FWAF because of the 22 a day. and he had a friend who committed suicide. And so, and he also had veteran friends he had an uncle that served for, I think, 20 plus years in the Army. But what we do is we throw you on a pontoon boat, able-bodied, disabled, whatever. We'll take you 8 to 80 as long as you're a veteran. We'll take your family too. But we'll take you out in the Everglades and we'll take you fishing. And what that does is relieve stress. And you might think, oh, I don't want to go fishing. But it's not about fishing. It's about camaraderie. It's about being in nature. It's about, and catching fish is a bonus, because to see that smile on somebody's face when they hook into one and they reel it in, and they're standing there holding a fish in their hands, that's what it's all about. And being in nature relieves stress. Just being outdoors, concentrating on something else other than what's in your head is super important. And, you know, if you guys want to come fishing, if you're interested in come fishing, we'll be glad to take you. And it's just a great experience. And it's really beneficial for people that, with PTSD, with anybody to get out in nature and enjoy themselves. And the same with Carrie's nonprofit, Dive Prevent. Being underwater is phenomenal for people with PTSD. So I have various forms of PTSD, so it's been terrific for me. Both programs, I help out with both of them. I've been participants. They're phenomenal. So any way we can help the veterans, we can work together, we can make our nonprofits work together, because that's exactly what we're all here to do, is to help each other, help the veterans, and build networks and keep each other alive and happy and going forward.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you mentioned these two, Dive for Vets, and the other one is Fishing
with America's
Fishing
Finest.
for Freedom, Fishing with America's Finest, Fishing with America's Finest, and Dive for Vets. So exactly, like before, I've never heard of the fishing nonprofit, but that's a perfect example, because there's so many great veterans doing great things, you know, but, you know, where do you find them? How do you hear about them? You know, that's why I created this directory, because I want, and I want to add them, you know, after this conversation, I'll reach out to them and maybe have them on the podcast as well. They can tell their story, but, you know, have that, because that's why I want Carrie on there here too, because we should have that list of all these veteran nonprofits, but not just I don't want it to just be, hey, Dive for Vets and then a summary. I want it to be Dive for Vets. You click it and you hear Carrie, the CEO and founder, telling you about his passion and telling you why he created this and telling you why it's useful, and not being intimidated because you hear Force Recon Marine. You're like, oh, I ain't calling that guy. Then you meet Carrie. He's like, man, he's like Santa Claus. He's like the nicest guy now, except that he could probably waste you with a submachine gun. But, you know,
with his bare hands.
That is what, to me, yeah, but that's what makes it important, you know, to have the podcast, because then folks can see that and go, man, Carrie seems approachable. You know, I want to go Dive for Vets, you know, so that's the whole idea of it, you know, so folks can find each other and go, all right. And then we force multiply, because look, I just met you today. We've spoken on the phone, but now I really met you and I feel comfortable with you now, and I know what you're up to. Now I know what you're doing, and you know what I'm doing. And that's how we force multiply. That's how we build this community here in South Florida. And it's scalable. We start here in South Florida. Hopefully it spreads, because it's all about the 22 a day. You know, I say it's a business network, but really the underlying is anxiety, not just the suicide, but anxiety, depression, and suicide. And the reason I say that is because suicide is like it's at the tip of the iceberg. That's like the worst. But underneath the surface, it's anxiety, depression, which a lot more than 22 a day are experiencing. Yeah. You know, and we deserve not to be experiencing that. I'm not saying I want special handouts, but like, hey, you know, like we served our country. We shouldn't suffer for these things, or there should be things in place. A better exit strategy. For example, in your case, when you left and you went through being paralyzed and everything, it felt like, you know, they just dismissed you. You were no longer, like you said it in your words, I was no longer useful to the United States Navy. That's jacked up to think that way, you know, when you still have a lot to contribute, just, you know, not the way that you did before. So knowing that you're not alone, knowing that there's other veterans out there that have experienced the same as you, I think that's incredibly helpful. Because you mentioned the diving, which is, of course, is beautiful because like otherworldly. It's like going to another planet and just an escape from everything. And the fishing. But at the end of the day, what it's really about, it's the brotherhood. It's the camaraderie. It's about being around other guys and going, oh man, you know what? I'm not by myself. You know, I'm not. It's so easy to feel like you're the only one going through shit. Just like when you saw those others, you're paralyzed and you're in a wheelchair, and it's so easy for you to feel sorry for yourself. But then you looked over those guys, you're like, man, those guys are worse than me. That guy can only move his mouth. He can only use, you were saying he was breathing. All he could do is breathe a ball or something, you were saying? Like, wow. And you're like, well, he can do it. I'm going to stop being such a little punk, because if this guy can do it, I know I can do it. I got to pull myself into this. And you have, but like you said, and I say it too. Well, people see me here like, oh, Andre, he's got a 501c3. He's got it all figured out. That guy's never depressed. He's always happy. I see him happy on the podcast. Like, he's always happy, in a good mood. Bullshit. I get depressed. I got all the faults like everybody else. I have the insecurities. Is this going to succeed? Is this going to fail? How many views did I get? And that's the thing, though. That's one of the things, though. I don't care about the views. I care about the intention of what we're trying to accomplish. I'm like, man, when I have 100 episodes and I have 100 veterans I've interviewed, those are 100 stories. And I have a directory with 100 different interviews, and you can click it and you can go to that nonprofit, or you can buy the Evan Graves book, Graver's book. You can look, it's right there. That's going to be the accomplishment. But wow.
The key is we can do all these things for people. We can have our nonprofits. We can do everything. But if the people aren't ready to receive the message, that was the key thing for me, was when I was finally ready to receive the message. That's when I got better. That's when I took control. So it's about being able to, wanting to receive the message, being able to receive the message and knowing how to do something with it.
In your experience, can you give any advice on what would help enable you to receive that message?
So when I first got hurt, I was in rehab. This is probably 2 to 4 weeks after I got hurt. So I'm still a fresh wheelchair guy. I'm still trying to figure it out. And I broke my shoulder in the accident. So it took me a long time to get, it took 6 weeks for that to heal. So then I was finally able to start using a wheelchair. So I had a guy come and he's super low injury down in the L1 tailbone area. And my therapist was like, hey, Jake, show Evan how you can stand up. So she brings a walker over, and Jake stands up, and he's standing there on one leg, screaming at me like, you're going to have the best life ever. You're going to live a better life now that you're paralyzed than before when you were walking. And he's giving me this speech, and I looked at him and said, shut the fuck up and sit down, and I don't want to hear it. And I was angry. I was just angry. That's all I can say about that. I was angry. And years later, I was out in Colorado. The VA puts on a disabled veteran ski clinic. So I was out in Colorado skiing, and Jake comes up, and I said, hey, Jake, I want to apologize to you, man. And he said, what for? And I said, you remember that day in the clinic? And he goes, oh, yeah, I remember that. I said, I'm sorry. You were right. I'm living a better life now than I did when I was walking. I did more stuff. I've done more stuff, been more places. I've had a great life. I could thank the wheelchair for helping put a lot of that stuff in place. So, but the key, it took me a while to be ready to receive the message. It wasn't until I was home by myself in the middle of nowhere that I was like, because all these guys would come into my room and tell me how great my life was going to be. And I just didn't want to hear it. And finally, a friend of my mother's gave me a book, and it was about a prominent journalist. I can't remember his name, but he's been on the news network. And he's a paraplegic. And I read his book, and I was like, oh, he went through the same thing I did. So, okay, I can do that too. So it's just when, and my mom said that, that she's like, what happened? There was a marked difference between, that before and after. And I was like, I was just ready to receive the message. So I don't think that there's a key to finding a time or being able to push the message on somebody, because I had people come to my bedside and stand there and tell me the message. And I don't want to hear it. It wasn't until I was ready that I heard it. I mean, it was there all along. So,
but was there something that made you want to hear that message? That made you ready for that message? Like, what was it that you were like, you know what, now? Because you heard it a million times, but there was that one last time where you were like ready to receive the message. Was it other factors in your life that
I think it was just
unrelated?
I honestly don't know. I can't tell you that, but I think that being at my mom and dad's house in the middle of nowhere by myself most of the day, and realizing that this was going to be my life if I didn't do something different, and I didn't want that. And I think that was the key, is just finally deciding that this wasn't the life I wanted to live. I didn't want to lay in bed all day watching TV and being isolated. So it's just like, I want to go do the stuff that I used to do. And that was probably the turning point of being able to hear the message. So I can't tell you that when
It's a
that's gonna
self
happen
journey.
for anybody, but it's when you're ready.
It's when you're ready to hear it. But let's say this though: if those guys were never telling you the message, how would you ever even receive it? So it took them to relentlessly keep coming back at you. So if you would have been in isolation, is my point. If you would have been in isolation in your apartment without your wife, without anyone, just in your sadness, that's when we lose veterans.
The key is the veteran the person has to be ready to receive the message, but we have to keep delivering the message. And that's what you're trying to do. Just deliver the message. That's what we're all trying to do. Deliver the message.
Yes.
You're not alone. There's help out there. We can help you. So I guess keep delivering the
That's
message.
it. No, that's
and
it.
In some form, that's, it may, somebody may say it in a different way, or you may read it, or you may see it on TV or whatever. Mm-hmm. It may hit you in a different way than it has ever before. And I think that's what happened to me. I finally heard the message. Whether I was ready to receive it, I finally
heard it. That's the next step. Yep. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's good. That's powerful. That is powerful. Well, awesome, brother. Well, listen, I think we're good. I think we've covered a lot today. What I would like to have you back when you publish your book, the ones that you're working on, and we can have an update and talk about that. Talk about, things that have changed from today of filming this podcast to when you publish your book. And with that said, give not a shout out, but I would like for you to talk about your book. Where can they find them? Where can everyone find your books?
You can go to evangraver.com,
okay.
And they're available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kobo, iTunes, anywhere you want to buy a book. So, ebook, paperback.
Excellent.
I don't have audio yet, so if there's a nice veteran with a good voice who does audio, then we can strike a deal.
Thank you for being our guest at the Warfighter Sanctuary podcast. I think we covered so much. I can't wait to have you again so we can get an update on your book, on your latest book. And again, thank you for joining us. Warfighter Sanctuary podcast every Friday, except for the last couple of Fridays because I'm having trouble with editing. Thank you and have a wonderful week.
Hey, you too.
That wraps up another episode of Warfighter Sanctuary. Thank you for listening. For more information on Vetranet and the businesses featured in this podcast, be sure to check out our website at vetranet.com. That's www.Victor Echo Tango, Romeo Echo, November Echo Tango.com. Become a Patreon subscriber and get VIP access to the Blue Falcon Show, where we continue the interview with their unfiltered thoughts on a range of topics. Some serious, some trivial, always entertaining. Like and follow our Facebook page to join the community at facebook.com/groups/Vetranet. Intro music provided by Army veteran Sabo of NSA Entertainment. Post-show music provided by Marine veteran Justin Martin of JLM Entertainment. Voiceover provided by Marine veteran Mark Denstead of voicedbymark.com. Until next time, remember, hiring a veteran is thanking a veteran. Thank you for your support.